the co-director for YP4, also known as Young People 4, a social justice incubator with a national network that centers on Black, Brown, Indigenous, disabled, and LGBTQ plus leaders in education, media, politics, business, government, and everywhere. YP4 is super dope. I encourage folks who are on this call to look them up, join their amazing alumni network, and do their fellowship program. I'm repping class of '09. The fellowship program. So yeah, great group and super excited to stay connected. And even more excited to have Andrea here today to talk to us about civic engagement.
Thank you so much, Jason. And hello to everyone. I see all of you introducing yourselves here in the chat. Christian, Richard, Lauren, Emily, thank you all so much for joining. Super excited to have this conversation with you all today. So just to give you all a quick overview of YP4, some of you, might not have heard of us before. As Jason mentioned, we are a social justice incubator. And what we do is provide lifelong social justice leadership training to unlock the potential of young people who have been historically left out of opportunity. And we have a national network that, as Jason mentioned, centers Black, Brown, Indigenous, disabled, and LGBTQ plus leaders that are leading in all areas and in all fields. And because for us, we envision a world where there are leaders that are leading in all industries that are all rooted in social justice values and solutions. And for us, at the core of social justice is civic engagement. And so that is why we're here, and that is why we're having this conversation. So this training is actually part of a larger campaign called Building Power to Win, with the aim of training young folks across the country to center civic engagement by centering the issues that you all care about. We know that there's been a lot said about how we participate and whether we participate and if we participate. And this larger campaign is really meant to break down some of those barriers and bring our communities along in the process. So actually over the summer, we launched a free civic engagement training series where we broke down each level of government, how it functions, and how the issues that we care about are related to each level of government. So I highly recommend all of you to go into our YouTube. All of our trainings are open and they are free. So I'm going to actually put the link here in the chat for you all to take a look after this training and watch our training series. So what we're going to do today is actually do a small intro of that so you can to kind of plant the seed and you can go and see the rest of the trainings for yourself. And yeah, are y'all ready to get started? Let me know in the chat. Yes, Jason, highly recommended. Great lineup of speakers. Thank you. And yes, we're ready. Awesome. Yes, Lauren, Caitlin, perfect. So to get started, so like I mentioned, this was part of a larger training series that we did over the summer where we broke down each level of government. So I also encourage you all to be social with us. On Instagram, we have at Young People 4, and our Twitter, we are at YP4. Share what you're learning, share it with your community, and let them know that you are doing this training because it's awesome. And also tag Health Gap and for doing all this amazing work for putting this together. So for the agenda, we're gonna start off with doing a Civics 101. Just do a brief recap using kind of the federal government as our case study. And then I'm gonna present you all with a really awesome tool that YP4 actually just launched very recently called Arrive with 5. And then lastly, if we have time, we'll go into a Q&A and give you all a chance to ask questions. So we already did this. You all let us know your name, your pronouns, and your location. If you want to drop in here what you're excited about or what you want to learn, drop it here in the chat. And I'm super excited to hear what you all are excited about. So if you want to go ahead and do that in the chat. So let's start off with thinking about how we participated in 2016. So when I mean we, I mean young folks 18 to 34. You know, I'm still youngish. I consider myself in that cohort. So let's think about how we participated. So in 2016, to provide some context, there were 200,000 eligible voters, right? How many of those do you think were young folks? Let's get some guesses in the chat. Half? One. Okay. Yeah, so of all of those folks, over 65 million of those were young people. So I say this to say is that the purpose of this training is to provide you all with a framework to center civic engagement and your work and in your communities so that we can create wins for our communities. We know that democracy has never, in this country, was never meant to include our communities, right? It was never meant to include immigrant communities, Black folks, Indigenous folks, women, young folks. It was never meant to include us. And the fact that, and that's intentional, right? It's been an intentional strategy that we don't participate. For a long time, we've actually been taught that the issues that impact us on a day-to-day basis are separate from the political process. And that is what further keeps our communities from participating. But today we're going to challenge this notion and provide you with a framework to actually merge the two, and while centering the needs of our communities. So we're not here to tell you who to vote for or how to vote. YP4 is a nonpartisan organization. What we want is for you to have the necessary information to make the best decisions that align with your community and to give your community the context to actually meaningfully participate in elections. Does that make sense for everyone? Awesome. So like we mentioned, this is how many folks in 2016 of eligible young voters were young folks. So that means that we were actually the largest voting bloc. So in 2016, can everyone see the graph fully? Can I get a thumbs up if y'all can see it? Okay, awesome. So if y'all can see ages 18 to 34, we were actually the largest voting bloc. More than 35 to 44-year-olds, 45 to 54-year-olds, all other age ranges, 18 to 34-year-olds were the largest voting bloc. Can you all, let's do a quick quiz. In 2016 in particular, how many of these folks 18 to 34, how many folks do you think turned out to vote in 2016? Can I get some guesses in the chat? %, 30,000. Great guesses, great guesses. It's actually a lot lower than that. So in 2016, we actually turned out at 49%. And if you see, that's actually lower than every other age group, right? That means that over half of young people didn't vote in 2016. And then in 2018, in the midterm elections, we only turned out at 38%. So older folks actually turn out at higher numbers, even though they make up less of the population. So if we had turned out at even 10% more, imagine just 10% more, that means that our votes would have completely shifted the election. So can I get a guess of, again, in the chat, why didn't we vote? Why didn't we participate? What was the #1 reason that young people gave in 2016 for not participating in the election? What are things that you heard in 2016? Why didn't we participate? Why did more than half of the folks that are in our age group not participate? Lack of excitement about either candidate, people didn't like the candidates, apathy. Y'all got it. So the #1 reason was that people didn't like the candidates or the issues. And there are a lot of other reasons, like people were busy or out of town or problems with voter ID. There are a lot of voter suppression tactics that are intentionally created so that we don't vote. But the #1 reason was that we didn't like the candidates. What do y'all think about that? Our votes don't matter. Yeah, a lot of people thought that too. And think about this. All of this is intentional, right? We, for a long time, like I mentioned, we've been taught that the issues that impact us on a daily life are completely separate from the political process. And this is an intentional strategy that separates elections from the issues that we face. So what do you hear from traditional get out the vote campaigns? A lot of what you're hearing now, a lot of what you hear about the major folks that are leading, get out the vote, you should vote. What are the things that we hear? We hear things like vote for X candidate. There's someone you would like to have a beer with. Or vote, it's your civic duty. Do those things resonate with our communities? No, right? If somebody told you, vote, it's your civic duty, is that going to make you go and register to vote and during a pandemic and submit a ballot for somebody that you probably don't really fuck with? It doesn't work, right? So it doesn't work for our communities because one, we are worried about immediate needs. We're worried about paying rent. We're worried about staying safe from COVID. This messaging doesn't acknowledge why our communities are skeptical of these institutions in the first place. You know, US democracy was never meant to include our communities. So why should we vote for this candidate if they're not speaking to me? So what we have to do is completely shift the conversation. We have to acknowledge the reasons why our communities don't see how the political process impacts their daily life. Because what we are lacking is and it's been intentionally kept from us, is an understanding of what's at stake for us and in this and every election. And we need the tools to engage our communities in better conversations because we need to break down how all levels of government work and interact. Once we give our communities the full picture of what's at stake and how all of these levels impact the issues that we care about, the conversation completely changes. And we'll go through an example of kind of what that looks like. The conversation completely changes when you say, I don't like this candidate, I don't like that candidate, I'm not going to vote, right? What if we said, did you know that the president actually has the power to appoint the all cabinet members? And one of these cabinet members is the Secretary of Homeland Security. Did you know that this is where ICE sits? Do you care about ICE in your community? Then you care about voting for president because those are the powers that they have. So do you all kind of want to go through an example of what this framework looks like? Yeah? Yes. So we are going to do a quick overview of the federal government and make those connections for our community. So starting off with the federal government, right? So just to do a really quick overview, as many of you probably know, the federal government, there are three branches, right? The executive branch, the judicial branch, and the legislative branch. So each branch is, there are three branches because it allows for checks and balances and to avoid, any majority in dominating the decision-making process. So the executive branch, think like admin, like the CEOs, COOs, all of those things. The judicial branch is, they determine whether the law is fair and just. And then the legislative branch, they have the power to create and pass laws. So those are kind of a brief overview of the three branches. So let's get into it a little bit. This is kind of what the org chart looks like for the federal government. Like I mentioned, the legislative, the executive, and the judicial. So let's do a brief breakdown of the president. So what are some of the things that the president has the power to do? So the president has the power to nominate federal judges and cabinet officers. Also, they have the power to veto legislation. They negotiate treaties and represent the US abroad. They issue executive orders, and they also have the power to pardon people for federal crimes. What happened in 2016? Not wear a mask during COVID. In 2016, we had a presidential election. 4 years later, here we are with a president that does not wear a mask during COVID, right? So that's where we were in 2016, and we're back in 2016 now. So let's look at kind of what was at stake then and what's at stake now. So we know what powers the president has the power to do. So let's move on to look at the legislative branch for a little bit. So in the legislative branch, we have the Senate and the House of Representatives. So the Senate, they have the power to write laws, to ratify treaties with other countries, to confirm or reject the president's nominees for all federal judges and cabinet members. So actually the Senate is comprised of 100 members, and there are 2 senators per state, and they serve 6-year terms. So every 2 years, 1/3 of the Senate is elected. So in 2016, there were 34 senators that were up for election out of 100. What was the outcome in 2016? Can y'all remember who controlled the majority in the Senate? In 2016, what happened? So there were 34 of 100 seats that were up for election. What happened in that election with the Senate? Who controlled the majority? Was it the Democratic Party or the Republican Party? Democrats, GOP? It was the Republican Party. So the Republican Party maintained their majority in 2016. So what happened in 2018? 2018 was a midterm election. There were 35 out of 100 seats up for election. Who controlled the majority then? The Republican Party, again, controlled the majority. Yes. So let's look at the other side, the House of Representatives. So they also introduce bills and resolutions, and they can offer amendments to these laws. And there are a total of 435. So 435 representatives, they're elected to individual, what you call congressional districts in your state. So in 2016, all of them were up for election. Who controlled the majority in 2016 after the election? Was it the Republican Party or the Democratic Party? Let's get some guesses. So in 2016, it was the Republican Party. So after 2016, Republicans controlled the majority in the House of Representatives. And in 2018, all seats were up for election again, because these are 2-year terms. All seats were up for election again. What happened in 2018? There was a shift. So in 2018, actually, yes, Democrats controlled the majority. So there was a shift there. So what does this mean? So one of the things that we said that the president has the power to do is appoint heads of federal agencies, right? And who has the power to confirm or deny them? The Senate, exactly. So we said the president has the power to appoint them, and the Senate has the power to confirm or deny them. So what are federal agencies? So these are specialized departments that concentrate on a specific issue. So they make up all of the things that you see here on the screen, like the Department of Education, the Department of Defense, the Department of the Treasury, all of these things, including the Department of Health and Human Services. So the president appoints who the person that's going to lead it is, and then the Senate can confirm or deny them. And who is the Senate going to confirm or deny? Someone that they agree with, right? So in 2016 and 2018, we saw that what was the outcome? The Senate controlled the majority because of the outcome of those elections. And so let's look at an example of what's happened since then. So the Department of Health and Human Services. So what do? They coordinate with local, state, territorial, and tribal governments, as well as the private sector, on how to respond to the pandemic. It oversees almost every federal public health agency in the country, and it has a budget of $1.3 trillion. So that's how much power this agency has. So all of the agencies that are overseen by the Department of Health and Human Services, also known as HHS, they were really slow to alert the public about COVID-19 and the magnitude of the crisis. And they failed to produce tests in the beginning to patients that were sick. Do you all remember how hard it was to get a COVID test in the very beginning? I couldn't get one. And they were also, they didn't provide protective masks to hospital, even as doctors were begging for them and pleading for them. So let's think about what happened here, right? Who leads this agency? The Secretary of Health and Human Services. Who appoints them? The president. And who confirms them? The Senate. And let's think about who controlled those in 2016 and 2018, right? So there's one more thing that the president and the Senate work together on that we mentioned, that the president nominates and the Senate confirms or denies. There's one more thing. Can y'all remember what that is? We said the heads of federal agencies, and there was one more thing. Yes. So Tiffany, you said SCOTUS. So yes, judicial nominations. And I'm sure that y'all have lots of feels about this. So let's talk about it. So what does the judicial branch do? We have judges from the Supreme Court, which y'all have been hearing a lot about now, the 9 Supreme Court justices. Also, we have lower courts that are known as courts of appeals or district courts. All of these are federal judges. So what are federal judges? Federal judges are responsible for overseeing cases that are criminal or civil cases that actually have a huge impact on our lives. So if you think about the Supreme Court, it's the highest court in the country, and it's responsible for deciding whether or not the law violates the US Constitution. Federal judges rule on important cases that affect virtually every issue that is important to us, whether we're aware of it or not. From deciding on the legality of abortion to determining whether discrimination on the basis of gender or sexual orientation is legal, the courts are the final say. So think about this, y'all. If the court says no, there's no other place that you can go, right? Congress can pass a law, states can pass laws, but if it makes it all the way to the Supreme Court, it's the final law of the land. And that's a huge power, right? So federal judges are nominated by the president and confirmed by the Senate for lifetime appointments, y'all. How many federal judges do you think there are? Let's give a quick guess. How many are there? A lot. There's a lot. $200? More than 200.
13.
There are 870 federal judges. Isn't that surprising? 870 federal judges. And who appoints them? They're nominated by the president and they're confirmed by the Senate, right? So let's think about this. These are all lifetime positions. So we know that the current president has made it a strategy to appoint extremely underqualified and actually very conservative judges to serve on the bench for a lifetime. Working with the Senate, because we know that the Senate is, as a result of the 2016 and 2018 elections, controlled by the Republican Party. The president has, how many folks do you think that the president has nominated since 2016? 193 for lifetime appointments. How do y'all feel about that? Exactly, Whitney. It's kind of infuriating if you think about it, because the average age of circuit judges appointed by the president is less than 50 years old. That's a full 10 years younger than the average age of President Obama's nominees. And these are lifetime appointments. So this is actually a historic transformation of the court. So let's look at the Supreme Court for a little bit. So the Supreme Court, we have 9 justices. Before 2016, there were 4 justices that leaned conservative and 4 justices that leaned liberal. And I use quotation marks because those are different definitions for all of us, right? And there was 1 justice that kind of was a swing vote. So what's happened since 2016? Let's take a look. So we had 2017, Justice Antonin Scalia was replaced by Justice Neil Gorsuch. This was a justice that was appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate. 2018, Justice Anthony Kennedy, who was the swing vote, was replaced by Justice Brett Kavanaugh. So now we are at a position where we have 5 conservative-leaning justices and 4 liberal-leaning justices. And a couple of weeks ago, unfortunately, we saw Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg pass, who is one of the most liberal-leaning judges on the Supreme Court. So now this person here is going to be nominated by the president and confirmed by the Senate. And it's going to be a complete shift in the makeup of the court. Does anyone know who this nominee is? Amy Coney Barrett, exactly. So Amy Coney Barrett was nominated by the president, and now, next week, actually, they're going to be holding hearings. And who has the power to confirm or deny them? The Senate. And the Senate is controlled by which party? The Republican Party, as a result of the 2016 and 2018 elections. How do y'all feel about this? How does this make you feel? How does it feel? So the conversation completely changes when our communities know what's at stake, right? So in 2016, when our folks were saying, oh, I don't like the candidates, would the conversation have completely changed if we knew what was at stake? If we knew that this was the position that we would be in 4 years later? What do you all think? Give me some exclamation points in the chat if you think that the conversation would have been different.
We'd have been running, not walking, running.
Right. It would have been a completely different situation. And so it's up to us, now that we have this information, to bring this information back to our communities, because this context is intentionally kept from us, right? So this is just one piece of the puzzle. We did an overview of the federal government. I highly encourage you all to go to our YouTube and watch the rest of the trainings for the local, state, and international levels as well. I'm going to put it here, bit.ly/YP4 watch. And I challenge you all to bring this information back to your communities, and I'll give you all a tool to do that. How many of you all put some exclamation points in the chat if you want to bring this information back to your community? Let me know. Give me some exclamation points in the chat. Yes. Yes. Yes, y'all. Christian, Navita, Lauren. So do you all want a tool to help you do that? So YP4, we launched a tool called Arrive with 5. So I'm gonna actually click on this link so you all can see it. Can everyone see this website that's popping up? Awesome. So Arrive with 5 is, it's a revamped mobilization tool that YP4 has that supports organizers in having difficult conversations around participation in elections. So all of this context, we help you have these conversations in your community. So you tell us 5 people that you want to reach out to, and we'll send you these talking points so that you can make those connections between the issues that your community cares about and voting at every level of government. So it's essentially a pledge, and here's how it works. You identify 5 people, you pledge to have a conversation with them, and we'll send you a guide. So once you pledge to have a conversation, we'll send you a guide with all of these talking points, with how to have a conversation, talking points to make these connections that we just made together, and making up how to make a plan to vote and what you can do outside of voting. So I want everyone to kind of take a couple of seconds to identify 5 folks in their life. Identify 5 folks that you think right now don't have this context, and you don't know if they may be voting in November, and you don't know if they may have a plan to vote. You don't know if they're registered. You don't know if they necessarily understand the connection between voting and the issues that we care about. And write them down. Write those 5 names down. And I'm going to put this link here in the chat. And I encourage you to, once you write those 5 names down, put them in this pledge. And what we're going to do is help you be accountable and help hold you accountable. So we'll send you the talking points, and then we'll also text you. Every Monday leading up to the election, we'll send you a text to check in, to see if you need support, to see if you've reached out to your folks. And after you reach out to them and after you have a conversation, challenge them to have 5 more conversations. Because if we do this, we're actually creating a chain reaction of real conversations in our communities. Beyond posting on social media, beyond just doing this touch and go communication that we know doesn't work, we're having real conversations, and it's a chain reaction. If the 5 people that you have a conversation with have 5 more conversations, and those folks have 5 more conversations, imagine the impact that we can make in our communities. Because traditional GOTV is touch and go. We are not touch and go because we are actually building power in our communities. So we'll help you hold yourself accountable. So give me some more exclamation marks in the chat if you are going to fill this out, and we'll help you have those conversations and hold you accountable. And with that, yield it back to the Health Gap team.
Thank you, Andrea. Such a great, inspiring, and also mildly concerning presentation about
True.
But really thank you for that. I really want to turn it over to folks who are in the chat, or if you want to talk. I know there were some questions that folks had, so want to just open it up to you all, the participants in this conversation. What questions did you have for anything? I see one in the chat from Whitney asking, what if you're really bad at talking?
Great question. So yes, that is something that, we all struggle with having difficult conversations. We all struggle with not necessarily knowing how to respond when we don't agree with someone, or when folks come at us with facts that may not even be facts, or points that we fundamentally disagree with. So in the guide that we send you, we actually give you pointers on how to have a conversation. We have a list of starter texts that you can send to the folks that you care about. We actually have 2 pages full of texts that you can send. So we've got that down for you. And then we provide tips on how to do that and how to have a conversation and the talking points that you should be using. So, or that would be helpful for you to use. So if you go here on the website that I put here in the chat and submit the pledge, we'll send you these talking points. And every Monday leading up to Election Day, we're gonna text you to check in. If you have a conversation and you're like, hey, actually, I'm having a hard time talking about this, or I don't know how to frame this, we'll help you and we'll support you in doing that. So know that you're not alone in doing this. I know it can be overwhelming, and there's a lot of information that we went through today, but I encourage you to do the first step to reach out to those at least 5 folks in your community, and we'll help you with the rest. I also encourage you all to go to our YouTube and watch the rest of the Civic Engagement training series, so that you are equipped to have another layer to be able to have those conversations in your community. But yeah, thank you, Whitney, for that question. And if anyone else has any tips for how to have these types of conversations, let us know in the chat. And I think this would be a good space to share collectively.
I think that using today's happenings, everything that's happening in the world right now, you can use it as a talking point. I find that in my Uber drive to work in the morning, you can have a conversation and change somebody's mind just by giving them certain piece of information that they didn't know. This morning I was in an Uber and the guy was like, oh, I can't wait till all this go away. I was like, well, do you understand what COVID is? Let's start there. And they was like, what do you mean? I said, HIV and herpes are kind of the same disease, and they ain't find nothing for none of that in 30 years. So how they gonna find something for this? So, that started a conversation where he needed to have my number, because he was like, that's very interesting. I didn't think about it that way. Just things, little things. And I was talking to a person that was completely racist. He was a racist guy. And I made him have a whole conversation. After the ride, he turned off the car to finish the conversation. I'm at work. It's just how you frame the conversation is usually important. And talk about insignificant things, not things that people would think about. Let's talk about that bird that is the shit that just hit the windshield. That starts a conversation.
Yeah.
Yes, Pedro, you actually bring up an amazing point, in that the way we start these conversations isn't by, do you care about health equity? Or do you care about environmental justice? That doesn't resonate with our communities, right? Where they're like, okay, what are you trying to tell me? What are you trying to sell, right? That doesn't work. We have to approach these conversations by contextualizing what's at stake. Do you have a pre-existing condition? Do you know that your access to healthcare could be at stake with a new Supreme Court justice? It's actually the president that has the power to appoint a Supreme Court justice, and they have the power to take away our healthcare. Is that something that you care about? Well, the elections are in 3 weeks, 4 weeks. I can help you make a plan to vote. That's the way that we engage our communities with the issues that either are that we care about, that affect us deeply, or the things that we're mad about. If there's a friend that is ranting to you about how they, aren't able to go to the doctor because they can't afford it, or they don't know if they'll be able to ever pay off their bills, their healthcare bills, that this is a way to engage their conversation. I know you're mad about this. Did you know that this is the reason why? And this is the first step in what you can do about it. It's not the only step. It's the first step. And from there, we need to continue organizing. So, yeah.
I have a question. A lot of people that I talk to, like, I think in 2016, what you said about the 2016 election, where a lot of people didn't feel connected to either candidate, and so they didn't vote. I know a lot of people who are saying, like, well, it's because the two-party system is flawed, so I'm not going to vote because it doesn't, like, that is a lot of the reasons I hear for people not voting. So I'm wondering if there's a talking point, or how can we fight for a system that is not a two-party system in a time that is, like, not right up against the election?
Right. Exactly. And I think that's where kind of the disconnect is, right? When we're leading up to an election, this is an opportunity to build power. Right now, this is an opportunity, right? There are many opportunities in our communities of advocating with your elected officials, of organizing a protest, of organizing a community meeting with the folks in your community. All of those are opportunities. This is one opportunity, and it's a strategy. If we're voting in one election, we need to vote in all elections, and it's a strategy that we're voting in this one. And so we have to view it as the opportunity that is present to us now. After we vote for whatever is present to us now, that's when we organize. That's when we say, I don't agree with this two-party system. What are the things that we need to do? Who are the people that we need to mobilize? Who are the folks that we need to hold accountable? Who do we need to be expressing these things to? How can we get our community to express them together and collectively? That's when we organize. Organizing happens every single day of the year. And election day is just the one opportunity to build power. And we have to use all of them that are available to us every single day of the year. Mm-hmm. Thank you for that question. What are some other things that you all kind of hear in your communities, especially about this 2020 election? What are some things that you all are hearing?
Tuskegee.
Sorry, did someone say something?
Yes, I said the Tuskegee experiment. Me as another thing that I also do is try to get people for clinical trials. And it's hard to get people for clinical trials when history hasn't done people of color well. So, the first thing people always will come up with is Tuskegee. Outside of Tuskegee, a lot of people didn't know, but in Puerto Rico, there's a little island next to it, and they used to use it. The government used to use it to bomb it. And so Hispanics on the other side of that, they're not cool with experiments.
Right.
So, can you hear me?
Yeah. Go ahead, Jason.
So I think like Pedro, that's a really good point around kind of like mistrust, right? I think like Pedro's also talking about like just seeing how ICE and what we're hearing about like how ICE treatment of like detainees, women, and like these, like, I think like there is a sense of lack of trust in politicians across the board. So when folks are thinking about just disengaging, not just from the electoral process, but from politics altogether, I think like is a real kind of like community concern. It's just like politics. Not only are politicians not able to save us, but politics in and of itself are just incapable of like saving or like supporting or advancing the needs of like Black and Indigenous folks in particular.
Yes.
So yeah.
Yeah, no, exactly. Thank you for that. And it's very important to be very, very clear on this point that politicians will never save us. They will never save our communities. Only we can do that. Only we can save our communities, right? And there's a lot of rhetoric around elections, which is actually what turns off our communities a lot of like, this politician is going to do all of these amazing things for your community and they're going to save your community. That is not true. And that will never be true because the system that it was built under was intentionally created to not include us. That's not how it's going to happen. The way that we reframe it is to say, okay, I don't trust this politician. I don't trust this system, but I'm using this opportunity to build power and I'm going to continue doing it because it's going to make every single day of the year a lot harder if I don't take this one opportunity on this day to build power. It's going to make every single other day that we organize harder for us. Someone said it at our Civic Engagement Summit very, very clearly, Cedric Gregory Sandena. He said, who would you like to organize in the next year? Don't think about it about who's going to save us. Who would you rather organize? This candidate or that candidate? And that's what this is about. It's about making our lives easier, not harder, to organize every single day of the year.
Yeah. I'm gonna just kind of like rephrase it just a little bit for like I think like at the same time because I like Pedro we organized together at Vocal New York. It's just similar to like, hey, there are some candidates where we are able to work with and there's some candidates we're not able to work with. There's some candidates who are able to hear our agenda and we can actually they respond to pressure. There's some candidates who do not respond to public pressure or what we are developing, what we're building from the ground up. And this election is about like, okay, cool. We need to recognize that there is a candidate who can respond to grassroots power building political pressure to get what we want. We're unable to do that with this current like elected. So thank you for that, Andrea.
Yeah, thank you. And just as a reminder, YP4 is a nonpartisan organization. We're C3, so we wouldn't, we're not telling you who to vote for or who to put into office, but the point is to give you all this context so that you can make those conclusions in your own communities. But yeah, thank you. That was, I think, a perfect rephrasing, Jason.
Thank you. I had a question, but it's escaping me right now. So I'm gonna turn it over to other folks. Do anyone else in the chat have a question or a comment?
So I do want to ask a question for folks. So one of the purpose of Arrive with 5 is to name 5 people that you want to have a conversation with. What are the kinds of folks that you think that we need to be reaching out to? We talked about the folks that are like lack trust in our government. We've identified, actually, if you go to our YP4 Instagram, we have a list of 5 different types of people. The folks that are like the doomer coworker, so the person that is completely disillusioned with everything that's going on and believes that we won't even be able to make a difference, so there's no worth trying. Or the folks that are the anti-political, so that they don't really engage in politics, but they vent about everything that is wrong in their community. What are the folks in your community that you want to reach out to? People who have a difficulty with voting due to voter suppression, yes, that's so real, especially right now. We need to make sure our communities have all of the information to actually be able to cast a ballot. Christian, perhaps it may also be good to engage folks in grassroots groups of similar interests. These groups can also become political. Exactly. Whenever grassroots organizing and bringing folks together on the issues that we care about inherently is political. And the purpose is to build power, and that is how we reframe the conversation. Not necessary to informing them about candidates, but to assist them accessing voting. Yes, that's really important right now. Actually, in the guide that we send you all once you submit the pledge, we have all of the things that folks need to look out for in order to make sure that they have access to voting, and all the things that you should keep in mind when making a plan to vote, and what are the things to look out for. Because y'all, they're active, very, very active efforts to suppress our vote, and it's because they know that we have the power to shift absolutely every single election, without a doubt. And we need to actively combat those suppression tactics, because that is the only way that our community will actually be able to use the full power that we have as the largest voting bloc. Yeah, great conversation, y'all. Thank you so much for all of these great questions. I think we might have more time for more questions. I'll
we have
follow.
we have about 5 more minutes if people do have more questions. Yeah.
I don't have a question, but I have a comment. The people that we should be looking for are the people that don't have time to watch TV. There is the people in the fast lane. Just because they're in the fast lane doesn't mean they can't listen. That doesn't mean they can't, but they don't vote. But they depend on other people's information to vote.
Yeah, exactly, Pedro. Thank you for that. And so I actually just put in the link for the pledge again. And so think about it like this, exactly the folks that Pedro was saying. There are 5 folks, I guarantee you, 5 folks in your life that only you can reach, that you may not have always agreed with, that they may have, different points of view than you, but only the 5 points that only you can reach. And they may not listen to anyone else, but they're going to listen to you because of the special relationship that you have with them. I guarantee you there are at least 5 folks. And that means that no one else is going to be able to reach them. That means that's your responsibility. As someone who has access to this information, as someone who has been through this civic engagement training and understands what's at stake, that means it's up to us to reach those 5 people that only we can reach. Teresa says, I definitely have the anti-politics friends, including myself. Some of it stems from not feeling informed enough. Any news sources that you trust with unbiased information? That's a great question. I think I don't necessarily, I couldn't necessarily tell you which news sources to look out for. What I can do is, if I can direct you to this pledge, where we have, all of the information there, and we have our resources. If you also go to the YP4 Instagram, we post pretty frequently, and we cite all of the sources where we get all of our information. But definitely the one thing that I would say is to always double check your information, to double check what the information that you are, that whether it's through Instagram, whether it's through reposting articles online. Always take this information with a grain of salt, because I can tell you that even the most unbiased of news sources will never give you the full picture, and they will never give you the full context. It's up to us to find that context and to make those connections and to say, this is why this is happening right now. And this is why our community is experiencing this right now. They will never provide that full context for us that we kind of went through today. So that I would say that that would be my challenge to all of you. Yeah, like Pedro says, check all the info, but also do the work to understand the context and understand what those connections are, because if we are able to do that, we can bring that back to our communities, because no one else is doing it. It's intentionally kept from us.
Any final questions for Andrea?
Is anyone going to sign the Arrive with 5 pledge? Let me know in the chats, and I will look out for your pledge. And if you have any questions, also let us know and we can walk you through it. Like I mentioned, we'll be texting everyone to make sure that you have the support that you need. So we can continue the conversation. It doesn't have to end here. We can connect via text. And I will actually be one of the folks that will be responding to those texts, so you know that at least it's someone that you know and you're familiar with.
Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Really helpful information. Hope everyone takes the pledge to Arrive with 5. We'll send it out to folks again in email. Yeah. Everyone, join us next Thursday for part 6 of our training series, which will be on storytelling, story sharing, how to share your story to speak your truth to power. So it's going to be a great presentation, same time, same place.
And you might even learn how to share your story in a way that would help get people out to vote.
So you're going to ride with that.
Exactly.
Awesome. Thanks y'all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Thanks everyone for joining in.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
See you on Thursday.
Good evening.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.